Hello, everyone. It is February 2nd, 2021. I'm here with Joxer and with Sassy, who's probably going to poke her head up once or twice. Yeah, see. Yeah. So I got a few people here that are going to be doing this Bible study and devotional with me. Um, so today we're going to be reading through the book of First Samuel, chapter 16, and before that we're going to get started with Jesus is Calling for today. Hi Langley, welcome, thank you for joining. Yeah, hey, we got a couple animals helping out today, so unfortunately Joxer's kind of in a position where it's a little bit hard to read, but that's okay. February 2nd, Jesus is Calling for today. I am reviewing your... Sorry, not reviewing. That would be funny. Yeah, I give it 5 stars. No. I am renewing your mind. When your thoughts flow freely, they tend to move toward problems. Your focus gets snagged on a given problem, circling around and around, in it around and around it in attempts to gain mastery. Your energy is drained away from other matters through this negative focus. Worst of all, you lose sight of me. A renewed mind is a presence focused. Train your mind to seek me in every moment, every situation. Sometimes you can find me in your surroundings. Uh, Little bird song, a lightning bird song, a loved one smile, golden sunlight. At other times, you must draw inward to find me. I am always present in your spirit. Seek my face, speak to me, and I will lighten your mind. Hi, Ryan. Aw, thanks, bud. But I can't read now. And that was inspired by 3 sections of the Bible. Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. He is his good and pleasing and perfect will. Romans 12:2. And that's actually, the Transformers logo on my car. That's actually the Bible verse that inspired that. And then, therefore, brothers and sisters in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest, whom we confess. Hebrews 3:1. And then, lastly, look to the Lord and his strength. Seek his face always. Psalm 105:4. Yeah, the renewing of our minds. And it's something that I feel like it's not just a one-time renewal, because we get impacted and inundated from so many different talking heads and spin doctors. That's who I'm calling, like, news pundits and people that take news and spin it. Especially now in, like, the social media age, that it's easy to get into these patterns and grooves that might not be the best thing in the world. Not that they could be good, but they're not the best. And we can get trapped in those things if we're not careful. I was actually kind of writing out a prayer today about that very thing. So this is a very good and a good reminder to me for that. All right. So now we're gonna. Hey, Jasmine, welcome. We're gonna be opening up our Bibles to the book of First Samuel, chapter 16. There's a few different verses in here that are foreshadowing things with Jesus. So we'll get into that when we come past them. But The story so far is Israel didn't want a king. Or, sorry, Israel wanted a king. God was like, don't do that. It's not going to be good for you. And they're like, no, we want a king anyway. King rose Saul to be king. And he followed him for a little while, but then his ego and everything got in the way. And the lead priest at the time, Samuel, was like, all right, Saul, God's ousting you, and he's going to raise someone else up to take your place. And the big thing from yesterday was Saul thought, and he justified his actions going against God, but thinking that he was still doing what God wanted. And he found ways of breaking God's command while justifying it. And Samuel was like, no, that's not good enough. You're acting selfishly. You're acting egotistically, and you're putting others above God. You're putting yourself above God. He was even willing to risk and sacrifice the life of his son, Jonathan. Samuel now has said God's going to raise someone else up. Saul knows it. He's confessed that he has fallen short and that he has disobeyed God. And, for someone that now realized the errors of his ways, and if he's truly repentant, you think that he might be willing to succeed or let the succession go to a new king. And that's where we're going to be. Hi, Tracy. Welcome. We're reading 1 Samuel 16. And before we continue, I'm going to take another sip. First Samuel 16. Now, the Lord said to Samuel, you have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse, who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king. But Samuel asked, how can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me. Take a heifer with you, the Lord replied, and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which of his sons to anoint for me. So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. What's wrong? They asked. Do you come in peace? Yes, Samuel replied. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to do the sacrifice. Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and for his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, surely, this is the Lord's anointed. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, this is not the one for the Lord has chosen. Next Jesse summoned Shimea. But Samuel said, neither is this one the Lord has chosen. In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? There is still the youngest, Jesse replied. But he's out in the fields watching the sheep and the goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down to eat until he arrives. So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, "This is the one, anoint him." So David stood there among his brothers. Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had and brought in that he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. David serves in Saul's court. Now, the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and the Lord had sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with depression and fear. Some of Saul's servants said to him, "A tormenting spirit from God is troubling you. Let us find a good musician to play the harp whenever the tormenting spirit troubles you. He will play soothing music, and you will soon be well again." "All right," Saul said. "Find me someone who plays well and bring him here." One day the servant said to Saul, "One of Jesse's sons from Bethlehem is a talented harp player. Not only that, he is a brave warrior, a man of war, and has good judgment. He is also a fine-looking young man, and the Lord is with him." So Saul sent messengers to Jesse to say, "Send me your son David, the shepherd." Jesse responded by sending David to Saul, along with a young goat, a donkey loaded with bread, and a wineskin full of wine. So David went to Saul and began serving him. Saul loved David very much, and David became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, asking, "Please, let David remain in my service, for I am very pleased with him." And whenever the tormenting spirit from God troubled Saul, David would play the harp. Then Saul would feel better, and the tormenting spirit would go away. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. There's a couple really, really interesting things in here. And I do want to get to them. But first, like I said, there's 3 different sections in here that look forward to Jesus. So the first is verse 1. "Now the Lord said to Samuel, 'You have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king.'" So 1 Samuel 16:1. Here, the Lord directs Samuel to select a new king from among the sons of Jesse, the grandson of Ruth. In Bethlehem, Jesse is Jesus' ancestor by some 30 generations. Matthew 1, 1 to 17. And then 1 Samuel 16:7. "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him, and the Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.'" Here, God's prophet Samuel is looking for the majestic appearance of a future king. But God tells him to ignore the physical appearance and instead pay attention to the heart. Later in Isaiah, the coming Messiah is the coming Messiah is prophetically described as having nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance. Isaiah 53:2. And that's what I want to get back to. And lastly, the thing that's kind of foreshadowing is 1 Samuel 16:12 and 13. "So Jesse sent for him. He was a dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, 'This is the one, anoint him.' So David stood among the brothers. Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought to anoint David with oil, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. From that day on, then Samuel returned to Ramah." Here, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon David when he is anointed with oil. Later, when Jesse is anointed by John the Baptist, later, when Jesus is anointed by John the Baptist in the Jordan River, the Spirit is seen descending like a dove and settling on him. Matthew 3, 13 to 16. So a little bit of like foreshadowing of like Jesus being God with the Holy Spirit descending like a dove Um, we got the fact that like this is actually part of Jesus' bloodline, um, and then the whole fact that like yeah, they wanted a king, and they picked Saul, who was taller, handsomer, looking stronger than all the rest. I picture Saul looking a little bit like a Spartan, and a lot of um, David's siblings probably looked somewhat similar, especially the first one, and they Abina, Abinadab. I'm really awful at saying that. I think he probably looked like that too. God's like, no, I know that's might be what other nations want, and that's what some people want to desire. They want the king to be like this sculpture of humanity, and the like people to worship their beauty and so on and so forth. But no, you're supposed to be worshiping me. I should be your goal. And at this point in time, I'm on Earth. What with like me on Earth, you think I'm a box. None of you look like boxes. Um, so God sees past all those surface things and he sees into our hearts. That's a good thing and it's also a bad thing. Well, it's not a bad thing really, but if we're so obsessed with this outward appearance and there's a rot in our soul, it comes out. Um, and others can kind of see into our hearts a lot too with our actions. Um, and a lot of times when someone does something that you can't do or that you're too selfish to do or whatnot, it comes across as people going like, all right, well that person's just foolish, and we start looking down on them. And I don't think that's a good thing either, right? And that's how it can come out. We're so good at discounting what other people are doing, or looking up to them in a way that's not all that great either. Um, but I'm forgetting the point that I was making. I'm sorry. And but going back to the appearance, because I know I was making a point about the appearance. When Jesus came, when God decided to come to the earth, he wasn't the specimen that Saul was or that Anadab was. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance. Isaiah 53:12. I think that's a nice way of saying Jesus was ugly. And as God was preparing future generations to be able to see God in the ugly so that we're not worshiping his beauty, we're not striving to have a body of a god as like Spartans and stuff like that would say. Um, it's like, all right, cool. You have Saul. Now David is a young man, probably a little bit weaker, but probably pretty rough and rigid because being a shepherd in those days was tough. You'd have bears and lions and things coming after your sheep that you'd have to fend off, and it was a low job that was a ton of hard work. And people often look down on shepherds, I believe. Um, and that's also one of the other cool things is like Jesus kind of redeems that idea of caring for the least of these, caring for the vulnerable is a good thing. Jesus refers to himself as the shepherd, and sheep are often vulnerable, and there's a lot of bigger, stronger, nastier things that can easily kill and devour a sheep. And as shepherds defend the flock against these bigger, tougher, stronger things, That's what Jesus did. That's what Jesus did when he was on the cross. Um, and there's just something about Jesus being ugly that I've always liked. I've always liked the fact that Jesus was ugly. I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's just because of how I see myself, and but it's one of those things where I'm like, there was nothing, like it goes on in that section. There was nothing pleasing to the eye, or something along those lines. But still, there was nothing beautiful or majestic. I think that's kind of crazy. The other big thing that I want to point out here is something with our mental health. In this particular instance, the mental health is issues that Saul ends up developing are because he turned away from God. He was acting in a way that was not only going against God, but leading others to mishear, misunderstand, and misinterpret God. His depression, that's kind of what kickstarted it. He was misleading others, and he was getting firm in that. And then David, who loved God, was doing what he can to serve God, willing to lay down his life to save the sheep for his family and community. He also plays music. He plays harp. He plays worship music. One of the only things so far on dealing with depression, a form of feeding it is music. How awesome is that? That's something that we do a lot today. When we're feeling depressed, we listen to music. So for Saul, he listened to harp music played live by David. David, I'm sure, especially, there's other books in the Bible that David had a hand in. I believe he had a hand in. Now I'm like, oh, I'm second guessing myself. But he did a lot of worship songs dedicated to God, I believe. Now I'm second guessing myself, so I might be wrong. No, yeah, this is Psalms are from David. So he wrote a lot of worship songs. So I think, doesn't deliberately say it, but as David is writing songs, he's writing songs about God. Songs of lament, songs of joy, songs of everything. He's writing, and he has written, and we have a collection of a bunch of his songs in the Bible. And he plays them for Saul. And that's one of the things that helps to not cure, but relieve his depression and anxiety. Mental health is something that definitely still impacts us today, and the Bible addresses. In this particular instance, it's diagnosed on why and how to deal with it. In our lives today, there are many, many, many different factors on why and how, and often it's not as clear cut. But I know one of the ways that helps me when I'm feeling low, when I'm feeling anxious, might be to just throw on a song that I really, really like. And it works just that much better when it's a song that's God focused, when it speaks about truth and the things that God cares about. Truth of the matter is, friends, that you might have a Christian song that is not really singing about truth and it's kind of light and fluffy. You might have a song that isn't necessarily written from a Christian band but sings about truth and hope and love in a way that's a lot more down to earth. So those songs often bring me to a place of worship and places of thinking about God. Like Linkin Park is by no means a Christian worship band, but they have songs that not for me, and I know for a few others, like help bring them to those places of, yeah, Jesus is awesome. Um, I'm sure you have other bands that do that for you too, that might remind you of how God rescued you, how God did whatever for you. Or it might just be a straight up worship song. It could be a metal worship song. Islander, um, their song Coconut Dracula almost brings me to tears every time I hear it because it hits me really strong. So, um, yeah, I think it's awesome that this early in human history, like 4,000 years ago, music is a prescription for anxiety and depression. I think that's really cool. All right, let me pray, and we can all get on with our days. AJC, awesome Jesus Christ, thank you so much for how much you love us, how much you care for us, how much you guide and direct us, for planting those seeds on who you are this early in the story, as we're finally introduced to the third main character of the story, David. And I thank you that David is, as we'll find out, a man after your own heart, but also um, one who is flawed and makes mistakes. And I pray that we can learn from Saul, and we can learn from David, and we can learn from Samuel in this whole story. One of the things that I'm really thankful for, Lord, is the fact that one, um, it's that reminder that you look beyond the surface. You look beyond the clothes. You look beyond all of that stuff, so that you look at our hearts, that we can come to you as we are, that we don't have to get into our Sunday best to worship you. We don't have to get into our Sunday best in order to pray for you. I can pray to you right here. I can talk with you, commune with you, while wearing a Raptors hat and a paint stained t-shirt, and you honor that if I come to you in honesty and in truth, because that's what you care about. You care about what's inside. You look past the facade of our out to look at our in. Even when you came down to earth, you weren't beautiful or majestic. Nothing to draw our eye to you. Lord, you want us to get past the junk and let us see your divine fingerprint on each and every person that we come across, whether digitally or physically. You're awesome, Lord. And also, Lord, I thank you so much that you address mental health at this point in time, that you address Saul's guilt and how it's leading him to depression and fear. And I know I can relate to that, Lord. I can relate to that so much. And I thank you that one, maybe two of the prescriptions for that anxiety from Saul is worship music, is looking towards you, admitting, confessing sin. But music, Lord, you've given us a gift of music that helps soothe our souls and can help bring us peace. I thank you for David and you giving him the skill to play the music so that we can feel okay in having music that helps us feel peace in our souls. Music that helps us to worship you, to look towards you, to come to you in honesty and in truth. Whether we're hurting, we're feeling nothing, or we're full of joy. I thank you for embracing us in every single way that we can be embraced. You're awesome, Lord. Thank you very much. Amen. All right, guys. Have a fantastic day. And yeah, God bless.